come just in time.
What is she doing?
Are you all right down there?
You were a treasured guest in living rooms all over Boston.
To Julia.
To us. I've had a recurring thought that I'd like to propose to you. An educational cooking show hosted by myself.
Feels flimsy to me. This is public television, for God's sake.
Shouldn't we go with someone with a more camera-friendly look and a less distinctive sound?
You were onto something so big. I'm just sorry that my colleagues don't have the vision to see it yet.
Where are these gentlemen? One of the advantages of looking like me is that you learn at a young age how not to take no for an answer. I don't know if I can do all this.
Doing this is genius.
Action.
Out of the tree of life, I just picked me a plum.
Welcome to the French Chef.
The BBC's making docs about prize-winning scientists while we're peddling cookbooks.
Men.
If every critic could silence every artist, how dull would the world be then?
Now, butchering a chicken, nothing to be afraid of. The legs, the wings, the thighs, and the breasts. I envision a confederacy of women and estrogen safety net.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Wait till your charms are ripe for the...
Oh, you're not afraid of a little flame, are you?
Suppose I'll have to get used to sharing you. Everyone wants you.
You ain't left the ground.
My advice, enjoy the ride.
Wait till...
Why do you call it the French? You're not French.
Wait till I...
She mugs like she's Lucille Ball.
Be a lady.
I am a lady, Dad, just not your type. Let her in.
Best is yet to come, come the day you're mine.
Hi, my name is Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we have a real treat as we are talking with Brittany Bradford, who plays Alice Naaman on the hit HBO Max series, Julia. Really, really, really excited to talk to her about not only her amazing art, but also hopefully some good cooking. We're gonna kick things off by introducing you to our facilitator today, Katia Woods in Philadelphia. She's joined by AAFCA member Carolyn Hines in Toronto, AAFCA member Bonnie DeShong in Chicago, AAFCA member Dana Abercrombie in New York, AAFCA member Janina Davis in Indiana, AAFCA member Jill Monroe in Los Angeles, and AAFCA member Tamika Newhouse in Atlanta. I am gonna sign off and let you guys do what you do so well, and I will see you on the other side. I'm gonna cook.
Brittany, I'm Bonnie DeShong, Bonnie's Eye to the Sky here in Chicago. And laying in my bed watching Julia has been a joy for me. I can't cook, so I'm getting it like that. But the one thing that's really getting me about your character and the way you're portraying her, being a woman in the 60s in the corporate world was hard enough, no matter what color you were, well, usually white, but also being a woman of color in 1963, woman, Black, single, in a man's world. You're playing her so well with your emotions and everything. You weren't born in 63. How are you bringing this out? Because you really, I was. You're bringing it out really well. And what do you think the purpose of them making the character a Black woman was for the show?
So I think it's a twofold question, right? So first, with the purpose of it all, I remember when I got the audition, I was really excited about it because, yeah, you don't see this kind of representation at this time period. And also the fact that this character is so young. I think if you see this character and she's Black, she's already fully formed. You don't actually get to see a young Black woman who doesn't really know, she's coming into her own on TV. You don't get to see the progression. So I was really excited about it. And when I talked to Chris Kaiser, who's the showrunner, I asked him this question because, of course, I feel like there is a character out there and this person exists, but as an actor, you don't want to be tokenized. You don't want to have to come in just to be the Black representation. So I said, why do you want this character to be Black? Who is she to you? And he told me a story about a family friend two people that were interracial couple that met at WGBH, a Black producer and a white producer, and said, no one knows the story of this Black woman. And a lot of the times that we hear stories, it's just who gets to tell it. So it's not like these people didn't exist, right? Sometimes we make what seems improbable impossible. And that's part of the issue, that Alice's in this generation were invisible. So he really felt a personal responsibility to bring that story to the fore. And I feel that same thing. And when Charles and I talked about the character, a big source of inspiration for me, I love research. I come from theater. I went to drama school. I can do research for days and days and never actually have to do the part because I love it so much. One of the hidden gems we found was this 1960s government sponsored video about the workplace and Black people entering white collar workspaces called New Girl in the Office. And I found it randomly, like on a YouTube search. And it was sponsored by the government. Lou Gossett's in it and Ed Asner is in it. And it's this young Black woman who gets a job as a secretary at a white collar space. And it's told partially through the perspective of the white people, being like, what do we do with this Black woman coming into this space? But there's also a couple of scenes with the Black woman going home and saying, I don't know how to do this. And I'm kind of scared. And how do I approach it? And Charles and I both said, that's Alice, at least at the beginning. And then there's a progression where she finds her confidence and finds her voice. And I thought, I would love to spend as much time with that type of character as possible.
Abercrombie, the coalition, kind of to piggyback off of the first question, what was really interesting, dealing with the 1960s and dealing with Alice's character, she's really pushing Julia ahead, really giving her that strength and that confidence. And so in that workplace, I was wondering, where does Alice find that strength? Because she's seeing so many other women progress ahead, women and men. And as a person of color, she's still at the sidelines.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was why I was really excited to have characters with Virginia, Alice's mother, and I hope that if we get a season 2, that you get to see even more of her family, because you see with Alice, every time she's in the office, she's always set back. And it's something that we all know as Black women, right? It's constantly hearing no, 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 no. And you still have to have some type of hope and optimism from somewhere deep down to say, I'm going to continue to go and wait or push or make my next yes. So I think that has been portrayed truthfully. But when you get to see Alice at home, you get to see where maybe she got some of this strength. And then you find out that her father was a doctor. You find out that her mom was in college as well. And if you think about a Black woman going to school at that time, that was a lot of research for me too, of saying, well, who could Alice have been? Like, what kind of education would she have had to even think to do this as a job potentially? Where was she? TV is so new. So to even have the idea of jumping into TV, no matter what race or gender you are, that's a pretty progressive thought process, period. So she already has that energy as a human being. And then later you get to see in episode 7 and 8, when she starts to have a bit of a love interest, that's a new part of her that opens up. I think it's all there. It just, as we all know, you feel trapped, and all of that kind of gets concaved in when you don't get to express yourself fully in the workplace. So it's there. She just has to find the space to push it out, even when everyone's telling her to do the opposite.
Hi, Brittany, Carolyn for Here's What Happened and Carolyn Toss podcast. Thank you so much for speaking with us. When I started watching this show, like at the beginning, Alice's role isn't really defined. She only becomes a producer, as we know a producer to be, like closer to the like episode 4 to 6. And what was interesting to me was, like, it occurred to me, this was only the second time I've ever seen a Black woman in this era being portrayed as a producer. The first time was Tessa Thompson's character Sylvie in Love. Yeah. Right. So it's such TV is new, as you said. It's a new role. It's a new role for a Black woman. Like she's like, I see TV as a future for myself as a Black woman in this space. So for you being an actress, like, what was it like for you to get to play such a pivotal character? As you said, the showrunner said, like, she's based on 2 characters combined. Like, but for you as a Black actress playing a character who has such a pivotal role in the development of a story and of Julia Child's character, she was a trendsetter. Both women were trendsetters, because this was the first time a woman cooking on TV became popular. So, like, what was that like for you and the research that went into that?
So because I'm the only series regular that doesn't have one person that's their person, everybody else has a character. Those people are real people. They all have, diaries or biographies or whatever. To me, it was important that Alice is a real person and that I was able to look at the people who've done it before and to honor them and to bring their names into the space. So I did a lot of research about Black producers at that time. Madeline Anderson becomes a character later on, and Madeline Anderson is also one of our first Black documentarians to have a film, out there, and she becomes a character. She also worked in public television and was a producer. Carol Monday Lawrence was a producer at WGBH, and I remember finding an interview that she did talking about meeting Julia Child and Barbara Barrow Morey, and they worked at WGBH, same place, a little later in like the late 60s, early 70s, producing Say Brother. Stan Lathan was also on that too. And that was a big turning point for me because I thought, well, that is Alice. And that is probably Alice's trajectory. So if for me, anytime I have a character, even if it's a fictional thing, I could be doing Chekhov or Shakespeare or whatever. I had a teacher who said, you always approach it like that character is in the room with you, that they're a real person and they are watching what you're doing and that you have to honor them, and it's not like you try to paint over it and gloss it over and make it really nice and pretty. They can look at it and be like, oh, that makes me feel awkward or uncomfortable, but that is me. And that I felt the same responsibility to Alice and the Alices that we don't know, just like I think Sarah felt with Julia or David felt with Paul. And it was actually making sure that I found those real women that made me want to be even more grounded and truthful to this character.
Hi, Kathy Woods, Couple Social, Philadelphia Tribune. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
What
meet
I
you.
liked about the show, even though you're playing a fictional character, that part of it is still true, that she saw the value when Julia got out that hot plate. It clicked for her instantly. Who Julia was and what the connection was with the cookbook. She understood this wasn't the type of book that you could sell by talking about it like you do a literature book. People had to visualize it and say, hey, if you like what I did here, go get the book. You can get more recipes. And also, I think she championed her because, again, she was like, there's a whole audience of women out there. You're thinking about it from a man's perspective, especially in that time, because women were more, homemakers and stuff. So talk about that, just as a woman seeing something that men often miss, hey, it's not about you. There's a whole audience out here that we could be pulling in, but you're missing it because you're looking at it through your gaze.
Absolutely. This is going to sound like a segue, but it is all in line. I am currently doing a play off Broadway by Alice Childress, who is a playwright that not a lot of people know about, but is incredibly influential. And the play is called Wedding Band, and it's set in 1918 in South Carolina, and it's about an interracial couple and all the anti-miscegenation laws and everything that happens. But a lot of those conversations that those characters have is the Black character saying to this white character, I see you. And I see your world and my place in it, but you don't see me in the same way. But I don't have an option of that. That's what I have to do as a Black woman living in this world. I have to see my point of view, but I also have to see everybody else's. And it is a burden, but it also is an incredible gift because your viewpoint is wider. We all know that. Everybody on this Zoom knows that. What's fascinating is that I think on paper, you look at it and you think, well, Alice is learning a lot from Julia because this show is about Julia and she's a little older and she has a little more establishment. But I actually think Julia learns a lot from Alice and her creativity and her she's just a vanguard in that way. And I just think it's just in line, and it's a really truthful representation because I have felt the same thing of being a Black woman in spaces, where you see something that someone else doesn't, and it's like, how do you represent yourself in that way? How can you stand in your own truth and not apologize for it and not feel like an imposter syndrome about it at the same time? It's hard, but that is the work. That is the journey, to stand in your own power and not to ask for forgiveness or acceptance from anybody else. And that's Alice's journey.
Hi, I'm Jonita Davis from the Black Cape. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I loved your character. There were a lot of times when she was going through something that I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, I know that feeling. I know what was going through her head at that moment. So my question is, this series, through Alice has so many lessons, I think, for women today out there in the workplace. I mean, because these things are still happening to where you're doing all the work, but your boss, you know, the guy and the guys are taking all the credit. But you're still having to provide them with the cliff notes of what they need to know because they didn't do the work to begin with, but they're taking the credit. And things like that is still happening. What do you hope that, you know, other Black women who are in these type of spaces are getting from this? And, you know, is there something that people who are, I mean, not non-Black women, people who are, you know, other, even white men watching this what do you think they could get from watching Alice in this series?
That's a great question, because it is very different, right? If you are a Black woman, than if you are the person doing the oppressing. I think their representation is such a keyword kind of thing right now, but there is something about being seen and seeing yourself in somebody else that can feel very affirming. Sometimes I think we just all have fear. I know I have the fear of like not being understood, or feeling like your experience is only your own and nobody else is like going through those struggles. And how do I talk about it? You see that Alice faces that too. So I know that I learned a lot just from watching Alice, being like, yes, I have that same thing. I'm not going crazy. Sometimes just feeling like I'm not going crazy is the starting point, the acknowledgement of the thing, the awareness, just having it be able to be a conversation, I think is really important. In a way, I feel like Alice can have her own TV series, just like following her journey because of what she's going through at the time period. And if you think about what's going on in the 1960s in general, I hope that, you know, if there are white men out there who are looking at it, that they recognize that there's a place to listen, you know, and that there is a place to acknowledge everybody else's strengths in the space, and that doesn't diminish their own. You know, it's the whole rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation, right? Because once people see the magic that is Alice, everything in the studio pops too, you know, there's people, they get more recognition, and then there's more money coming in, and then everybody has more jobs. And so it's not like she actually takes away from anything. She adds on to it. She expands. So it's not, somebody said this once, it's not about including, it's about expanding. It's just a different definition of it. And I agree with that.
Hi, Brittany, Jill Monroe, YouTube Stiletto Jill. I'm a researcher too, so I appreciate that. I research everything.
I love research.
What I wanted to ask you about is Alice's friendship with Avis that we saw starting to develop in, I guess it was around episodes 4 or 5, maybe around in there. I thought it was great that while Julia and company were off in San Francisco and Brittany was feeling a little down about it, but still working on her goal, her connection with Avis to me was interesting because I think it was something that Avis needed, but also there was a scene, I guess, was it when they were shopping for food and how the server was ignoring Alice and Avis kind of sweeps in, and she obviously helped, and I don't think she meant any harm, but it was interesting It was interesting to me that she didn't sort of acknowledge the racism, but I don't know that she knew, and I don't think that she, I think it was a moment. I just think that their connection and their friendship, even though it wasn't about race, I still think that they both learned some things. So I want to talk to you about that relationship and what you think the creators were doing in forming that and letting it roll out in the way that it did.
Yeah, I love those scenes, partially because I love playing with BB Newworth, who doesn't. Like, we just had so much fun together shooting those. But I love them for 2 different reasons. First, the first time you really see them together is when they're having dinner at the restaurant, and you find out that Alice went to school and she studied in France, and she had all of these things that were pretty amazing at the time in general, but that people everyone discounted her, including somebody like Avis, who actually does respect Julia, but still doesn't think of her as somebody who would have had all of those experiences. And yet there's this part of Avis, and that's who she was as a real person, from at least BB's account, that she was a fairly liberal person, and that she was someone who was willing to maybe just shift her viewpoint slightly in that regard. But at the same time, there are still microaggressions that happen when people aren't aware of the things that they're saying or doing. And Chris and I talked about that, and Daniel Goldfarb, the writer, with the scenes where they're going and shopping at Savinor's and gets ignored, or she tries to, Alice tries to make a stand with Avis and say, listen, you're a volunteer, you've got to be here, or you're not anymore. And Chris said, I want to show that Alice isn't always being respected and isn't taken seriously, but you don't have to be didactic about it. Like, how can we do it in a way that is truthful? It's not going to be sitting and having, no offense to Aaron Sorkin at all, I love Aaron Sorkin, but sitting and having like a 3-page diatribe about it, because that's not really actually what happens in day-to-day life. It might be a look or a glance or a small thing here and there. And then, you hope people go home and think about that moment and come back changed in the next interaction you have with someone. It seemed a little more truthful. And I think that's what they wanted to explore, is like, really what would have happened in the 1960s, not what we would hope would happen, not like, this big monologue from this Black character saying, this is what it is to be Black, but really what would have happened. And I really appreciated the honesty of that, and not trying to be too 21st century about it and have this, great, like, boss lady moment.
Hi, my name is Tamika Newhouse. I am the founder of Black Writers Weekend here in Atlanta, where we host a literary arts festival, curating conversations such as this. So this is really, really eye-opening, just to learn more about your character, in a sense, because I'm always encouraging people to link arms or find their tribe, to where they can grow and manifest their destinies and tap into their purpose together, versus always trying to be number one, or be the popular one and get the glory, or be the the queen on top. And no one really talks about like all the hidden gems, or those silent heroes that are being the number two, that allows that number one to really blossom and glow. So I love that I'm learning more about the character that she played in Julia. And I wanted to dive a little bit more into your personal experience. How has this character influenced you as far as how you communicate, engage with other women, not just women of color, but other women that want to get into this creative space and grow and learn? And then secondly, who is one of your, hidden gems, your unspoken heroes that, you would like to acknowledge,
I love that. I love that. I learned, oh my gosh, so much from this process for multiple reasons. I went to grad school. I went to Juilliard for grad school, and I graduated about 4 or 5 years ago now. And when I left school, I was primarily doing theater in New York, and doing Broadway and off Broadway. And, this was my first TV film job that I booked, period. And I booked it in 2019. I auditioned for it, and then we started filming in March of 2020. And we filmed for maybe 2 days. And then they were like, the pandemic hit, and they said, well, maybe we'll be back in about 6 weeks. So just take a little vacation. I was like, oh, I'll go home to California. And then 6 months later was when we actually came back to film the pilot. So that was around November. And then we didn't come back to film the whole season until May, June of last year. So this was like a really long process. And there were a lot of times where I didn't know if it was even going to still happen, because I had friends on other shows that had gotten canceled and everything. And I think at the beginning of it, I was a little nervous because I hadn't done this before, and I hadn't done TV. I didn't know if there was actually a place for me in it. My type of voice, my type of personality, the way that I think or whatever, you just don't know if there's a place for all different types of Black women in this. And I didn't know if it was going to be on this show specifically as well. And there was something about the pandemic and having some time away and being with family, because I was home for the first time since I was a child, basically, since I was in high school, that made me just sit and think about things and think about how short life is. And it seemed like a wasted time to have all of this imposter syndrome and second guess yourself. I was like, what do I actually get out of it? I'm not getting anything out of it. And I got time to meditate more and to journal more and to just be in a garden and be with a dog and be with family and be with, non-judgmental things around me. And coming back to this environment, I felt like a real beginner's mindset and just pure joy, like pure joy. And I never had like such an easeful process doing this. I had such a great time. I learned so much from everybody. And it really was like honestly, like I love every single person on this. And I feel like it helped me come into Alice's truth and happiness and joy when she gets to open up and blossom, because I was getting to do that at the same time. So I learned a lot, yes, from playing her, but really from just the process of the show in general. And I would shout out Awoye Tempo, who is the director of this play, Wedding Band. And Awoye is amazing. And they just did an article on her in the New Yorker that I think came out today, and the dramaturg of the show, Arminda Thomas. And Awoye and Arminda and I, as well as two other people, AJ and Dominique, were part of a collective called Classics. And it's Classics with an X, CLASSIX.org. If people were going to the website. I'm sorry, .com. See, now I got to tell the truth, because I can't,
Google.
I can't be like saying the wrong thing. It's .org. Oh, Brittany, come on. I think it's .com. Anyway, so Classics is about basically exploding the classical canon of theater and bringing Black plays and Black playwrights to the fore that we don't know about. That's why Alice Childress has been a big part of our initiative, Kathleen Collins, Bill Gunn, everybody, right? And that process has been extraordinary because Awoye is the leader of it. And she's someone who basically creates opportunities. And she says, if there's not a space for us, then we make a space for us. We have a podcast series that's all about different moments of Black theater history that will be coming out soon, where we talk about Black people in minstrelsy. What was the complexity of that? Some people in Blackface and some people who weren't, traveling around the world and making money, but also having these images out there. We talk about Nyack and that there was a huge Black arts community there. We talk about ritual theater and African theater and how that influences us now. And I've learned so much from her. And she is someone who is she's just a hug. She is a hug. Like, you meet her and she just wants to bring everybody in. So I want to celebrate her and shout her out. That was a long answer to this, but she deserves it. So
I love it. I'm going to take that. She's just a hug.
Yes,
I like
she's
that.
just a hug.
Thank you.
Of course.
Brittany, way back in the Stone Age, I got my degree in theater and moved to Chicago to do theater. So
yes.
I know about Wedding Band, and I love what Classics is doing in keeping our Black playwrights to the forefront. I also love in Julia, the way the director of Julia has it where, like you said, it's not slapping you in the face. It's just taking you on a roller coaster. For instance, when they're all going out and he tells you, go lock up.
Yes.
Or just the small things that in their minds, you can see white people really think they're not thinking.
Right.
They're just thinking that what they're saying and doing is normal, but it hit me like, it ain't normal. This isn't the way it's supposed to be.
100%.
My question or observation, not even on that note, is I'm loving that you are cooking from the Julia cookbook.
Mm-hmm.
So it shows that Black people are not intimidated because it's the French book. It's other than greens, cornbread, and whatever, something else can be done. Now, how did you bring that into your life?
I tried to cook more, first of all. First of all, I want to say thank you for that other observation, because that was my observation of Alice as well. And I felt like I knew Alice wasn't going to have a lot of language until a little bit later in the series. So to me, it was important about what she's seeing and what she's noticing that other people aren't. It was all about where her eyes go. And what I didn't realize was happening organically, but I got to see now that I saw the full season, was there's actually a shot in the very first time you meet Alice, where she comes in and she has the clipboard and she's kind of, diminutive when she comes into the space. And it's the first time she meets Julia. And one of the last scenes that I ever did with Sarah was her coming, it was in the same exact room and going into the space and saying, hey, I don't know if I can even talk about it because it's in the finale, but they have the moment of what will happen next. And the clipboard wasn't here. It was down at my side and chest was open. And I was like, it's so small, but to me, that's a huge thing in the trajectory of Alice, so that meant a lot. I just want to echo what you're saying. Once I was like, oh, I guess we're not doing anything for 6 months, when I didn't know if we were coming back, I was like, well, I should cook more. And I was home and I really wanted to thank my parents I came back and both of my brothers came back. So there were 3 adult children back in their home. And so I tried to make an effort of, cooking more and and being more present with them just to say thank you for letting us, be in their space. But what I learned a lot from the show also is just cooking is just an incredibly meditative process. And it's so relaxing. And there's something actually about the difficulty level that the harder it is, the more I actually feel like my brain just relaxes into it and can forget everything else, because all you can do is concentrate on that one task. And it's just, I mean, there's no greater way really to love somebody than to cook for them,
Maybe that's why I'm single, because I can't cook. But anyway,
but listen, but when I'm by myself, I'm eating like cucumbers and string cheese and grapes. It's only like when I'm cooking for other people that I feel that I should honor my body more and not cook like a kindergartner for myself. But that's another topic.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Dana Abercrombie again. What I was really loved is the relationship between Alice and her mother. There's that tension that's there, but home represents a sense of freedom for her. There are conversations that they can't have, Alice necessarily can't have while in the streets or even with Julia. So can you talk about that kind of duality of tension yet comfort?
Yes, 100%. Thank you for asking that, because I got to help write those episodes, those scenes with my mother, and I think that's episode 4. It was really important to me that was like very specific, because Black people aren't a monolith. There's a lot of different versions of that dynamic that can happen. But I felt like, listen, there's not a lot of moments in this series that you get to see 2 Black women speaking to one another. So I felt an incredible responsibility to make sure that was being handled truthfully. And so with those scenes, I actually talked to a lot of friends about, what their dynamics with their parents are. And not only, so it wasn't just my own experience, but, Black friends. And to me, a lot of that, the conflict is really generational. There's a lot of, there's a respectability politics thing that's happening a little bit. We have the civil rights movement is going on, and, Virginia is coming from a very different perspective of what Black people do and should be and how they should respond in situations. And Alice is saying, we're in a different moment right now, and I might want to do something a little differently. I know that I've had those same conversations with my parents when, I'm like, no, we're all speaking up more about what's okay and not what's not okay. And, someone like my dad's like, but you're not going to lose your job, are you? And I'm like, I'm not going to lose my job. I promise. But that is a real fear, because for him, that would have been, he felt like he maybe had to tiptoe more, had to maybe keep that closed. And also I'm an artist and he's not. So it's just a different thing generationally. So there is a little bit of that push and pull, but it's love too. And I think how we portray love in the Black community might be a little different than other people do. And some people might look at that and think that, oh, Virginia's so tough on her, but that's coming from love. That's all love. And she just cares about her daughter deeply. And even when there is that conflict, you can tell that there is just such compassion and care for them. Alice cooks for her. When she gets there, she's so excited to make French onion soup for her mom. Like, she does go on the date. She does say yes to that. And I think they're just learning from each other. And I just think they're beautiful scenes. And I freaking love Adrienne Lennox. And we just laughed so much getting to play with each other.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So one of the things that I really love about how this show explores femininity and the female experience, especially the Black female experience, is that women are almost instinctively, we learn how to observe things and how to read people without noticing. Like, there's scenes between Russ and Alice where, especially the scenes I found really interesting, is after his wife had the baby and he's talking about how tired he is. And she's like, what about your wife?
Yes.
Like, she's all goo goo gaga. And you can tell, and Alice says, she's like, no, she's not. She's just as tired or even more exhausted than you, but he's not.
Yes.
He's more sensitive on his tiredness. And then there's the scenes with Avis and her where she's like, as you were saying earlier, like Avis is like, being a white woman, she doesn't immediately pick up on the racism that Alice is experiencing. She just thinks that Alice just isn't assertive enough. She's like, oh, you just, you got to be pushing. And Alice said, you can tell she's like, ain't got nothing to do with me being pushy. Exactly. Yes. And there's scenes like that with Julia too, where like Julia wasn't even aware that it was Alice who sold the story. It was her who made the show a syndication. But Alice is just observing how these people aren't observing their own worlds. So for you as an actress, like, how being an actress and being able to read people's body language and having to use that as a performer, how does that inform you as Alice, but also how does that also inform you as Brittany yourself as a person moving through all of these spaces?
I mean, that is kind of who I am as a person. I tend to be someone who likes to observe and kind of read a room and a situation before speaking. It's just like I want to take in my environment and what's happening and then figure out what kind of package I want to deliver of language or whatever. So Alice and I are very in line with that. And maybe that's why I got cast in the part, is like, I feel like I just understand that. But I also just want to shout out the writers, because even though our showrunner and the head creator of the show are two men, every other writer in the room was a woman. And that, I think, is a big reason why there feels like there's great specificity in that, and why a lot of the men do have a lot of language, and it's a lot of like rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat. But then when you see Julia and Alice and Avis, it's more about the emotionality and what they're observing. And I think that is because of all of the experiences that those writers had and then talked to each other about in the writer's room and put that in the script.
Yeah, I love like dialogue that's fast, but I love moments just observing and watching. And I think all of the female characters, especially even the Judith, the publicist, just the way
You're fine.
just the way she observes stuff. I love the interactions and
Yeah.
how the women themselves are just watchers, but also speakers as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, and I live in New York, right? So like that is part of being in New York, period, is that you observe, you observe things all of the time and you're just taking it in. And I try to people watch as much as possible. Like that's honestly probably where I get a lot of my acting from, is just watching others. And it's kind of been crazy during the pandemic. You get to be a little more subversive about it. You know, you can hide behind the mask, and I feel like I can actually see people's interactions more and just take that in and use that, or, store it for whatever character needs it down the line.
Great. Well, you did a fantastic job. I can't wait to see
Thank
the other
you.
episodes. I need to see who
Yeah.
exact guy is.
Go see it. It's a fun episode. It's one of my favorites.
Let's talk about the food. It's a food
Yes.
show, and I get it. We're all talking about Julia and you.
Yes.
But did you get to taste the food?
Let me tell you.
Because it would be a criminal to be on a show like
Oh.
this with this food. And talk a little bit about that, because people don't realize it was a movement. Like she changed the way Americans thought about food. Like even in the scene where Alice goes to the diner, and after she's reading through that book, she's looking at her dinner and she's like, this is not gonna work. So
100%.
talk a little bit about that.
That was the best part. Are you kidding? Like all of the food was real, first of all. And that doesn't always happen on a TV show, but it's all real food. We actually had an on-set food stylist. So we actually had a fully operating kitchen on set. And Christine Tobin was our food stylist. And all of the food that was Julia food all came straight from the book. It was all the recipes. And she would, taught me how to flip an omelet correctly. I really do not like onions, but I was like, obviously I have to try the French onion soup. And because I didn't say no to any food that was there. And sometimes me and Fran and Fiona, who are two of the other series regulars, we would just be like, what's cooking today? And we would just go to the kitchen, and she always left her door open. So if we wanted to taste things, or if we wanted to try something, we could do it. If we wanted to take food home, I ate coq au vin like 5 days in a row because it was just there. And so I tried sweetbreads for the first time, and I actually thought they were delicious. So that was fun. I mean, souffles and mousse and burgers and milkshakes, and just everything was so delicious. And that was the best part. I don't know how I still fit into all of those costumes the whole way through, because I took every opportunity. And if you think about it, if we have a scene with coq au vin, right, where you got to have like 50 coq au vins. If you're filming, or cutting into a cake, you've got to have them all ready. So they made like the chocolate souffle scene was crazy because she had to make like 50 chocolate souffles. And then what do you do with all of them? You don't want to waste the food. So the cast and the crew got to eat it all. And then they did donate food to part of, I think, City Harvest or Food Harvest, to make sure that food wasn't going to waste. So yeah, it was all about the food. It was all about the food.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another food question.
Yes.
So first, what was your favorite of all the on-set things you've ate? And what was your favorite recipe to cook when you were cooking for your family?
Oh, I made a really yummy, from the New York Times recipe, Filipino chicken adobo. It was so good. And so it's all in one pot too, but oh, it was delicious. Chicken adobo. I made it for, I think, Father's Day or something. And on set, honestly, it was the sweetbreads because I was so like, I don't know about this. I was like, I don't know how I feel. And it doesn't look great. You know, it doesn't look like it would be very appetizing, but Julia's recipes, as I'm sure we all know, it's basically just like add a pound of butter. And then once you add a pound of butter, everything tastes fine. So it really tasted like a really like delectable, like chicken nugget, as odd as that sounds. It was just like fried in butter and parsley and yumminess. So that was probably my favorite thing. And oddly, like they made scones one day because she also had to make food from the other scenes. So like there was a scene at, I think, Joyce Chen's restaurant, and that was all Chinese food, and it was all based off of Joyce Chen's recipes. So that day, everyone was eating like Peking duck and dumplings and everything. And there was a scene where somebody was making scones, and I was like, I'll take one to go. And it was warm and yummy, and yeah. So those are probably my two favorites.
That's part of the show. I mean, it sounds like it.
It was great.
So obviously food, love is displayed through food in this series and from the book. So what I'd like to know from you is, what recipe would you recommend for someone to cook for someone that they love, that you saw or that you?
Oh, I mean, there's something, I don't know if this is gonna sound so weird, but there's something really sexy about the coq au vin recipe. I don't know what it is. It's just like the smell of it, and it's the wine and the chicken. It's this like, it's a very sensual meal actually. So I feel like that with some nice candles, you know, maybe you can just, I love Palo Santos. Maybe just put that in the air, let it just percolate. Some like low dimmed light would be great.
An amazing wine. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Tamika here again. And so, Brittany, my question is for you. You spoke about imposter syndrome, and I wanted to circle the conversation just about your experience and how you're kind of navigating through that now. How do you celebrate yourself as you're going through the process of life, you know, and acknowledging, you know, the strides and accomplishments and things that you're actually achieving? So what are some things that you're doing to celebrate yourself along the way?
That's such a great question. This is kind of, it's a really crazy time right now because I just moved into this, like my first apartment by myself. I'm like thank you. I have this TV show coming out that I love. I'm doing this play that I believe in and love very deeply. So I feel like there's a lot of gifts that are happening right now. And there's a part of me, I think in the past, that'd be like, well, why me? Like, why am I getting these things, and thinking about, you know, all of the other people who might not have it. And I try to have gratitude, like have a gratitude practice and say thank you for all of those things. Meditating is really important to me. Doing some type of I like biking around my neighborhood in Brooklyn just to like see the world and recognize that it's also not all about me. Like I'm just an infinitesimal part. So how do I say this? Eckhart Tolle, that it was a presence and meditative awareness teacher, talks about just living in the ebbs and flows of life, you know, and not making the highs too high or the lows too low, and just saying thank you, but moving on when something is great, and saying thank you and moving on when something's not so great, and just trying to live in that in between. So that's what I'm trying to do right now. And just spending as much time as possible with people that I love, who see me beyond any job, beyond any type of work, and just love the thing that the person that they know before all of this happened.
Well, I am rooting for you. Congratulations on everything. And I'm right there with you. I'm trying to find it down.
We're trying.
Right. So I'm rooting for you. And congratulations on everything.
Thank you very much.
Wow. Brittany, thank you. Thank you. It is such a joy to see you on the show every week. And you're playing it you know, to perfection.
Thank you very
much.
much.
We are looking forward to seeing how this character evolves over the rest of this season and in future seasons to come.
Fingers crossed.
On behalf of the world's largest group of Black critics, thank you for watching this edition of AAFCA Roundtables. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all so much. That was
Everybody.
wonderful. I had a wonderful time.